and gentlemen, please welcome the President and CEO of the Consumer Electronics Association, Gary Shapiro.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. What an excellent conference this is. I've been fascinated all day. We are a trade association of over 2,000 technology companies. We own and produce the world's largest innovation event, the International CES, held each January in Las Vegas with over 3,600 companies, about 170,000 attendees. How many of you have heard of or been to the CES? Just a little market research here. How many of you never raise your hand when you're asked a question? Okay, that's most of you. Thank you. So, I want to talk a little bit about being human, which is something we forget. The part of being human is that we resist change. It's in our DNA. We try to preserve what we have, our families, our friends, what we have existing today. We have trouble with the concept of death, but yet we know all this change is inevitable. And what you've heard from prior speakers is that change is occurring now faster and faster for us. It's difficult for us to get our minds around. Now, for my career, I have focused on change. I've written 2 books about innovation and about 500 columns that have been published. You could Google it and look them up. 2 best-selling books, I might add. But change is what we do and change is what we are, and it's our destiny as humans, but we still resist it. I started out in my career fighting for technology change when the VCR was introduced, when the audio recorder and audio cassettes and the CD was introduced, when the internet itself was introduced. I testified before the US Congress in favor of it, saying it is not a massive copying device as the music industry is portraying it. And up in that time, I was fighting against the entrenched interests of the music industry, of Hollywood, of broadcasters, all trying to preserve what they have. And now we're seeing that more and more. I want to talk about 10 different disruptions that I see coming that are rather important, I think. And they all comes down to what we heard this morning from the EU VP for the digital single market. He talked about whether or not these changes will have jobs. Hurt jobs or help jobs. And he was very optimistic about it. And certainly we're going to lose jobs with all these changes. No question about it. I mean, if you just think about driverless cars, which are inevitable themselves. My 6-year-old son and I were talking about driverless cars recently, and he said, "Dad, what will happen to all the tow truck operators and the collision repair people and the insurance companies and all the others who make a living out of people having car accidents?" And I said, "What do you think should happen?" He said, "Dad, I think they should be trained for a year to do something else, and then they have to work." Which was essentially the same solution we heard this morning from the distinguished government official. Let's train people when they have different jobs. But whether or not all these changes are going to allow enough jobs for people, honestly, I'm not going to stand up here and say I know. I don't know. When I think of ISIS and why people are doing what they're doing, I think those people have too much time in their hands because they go out and they do stuff. When my wife and I occasionally have a disagreement and I said, "Are you going to divorce me?" she says, "I don't have time to divorce you." So when you're busy and you're working and doing things like that, I can't believe I just told that story. Fortunately, this probably isn't being recorded or streamed. I want to go into about 10 different trends very, very quickly and what the trends. One big one is wearables, digital health. That's very big, very huge. You all know about it, but we're still at the very, very beginning. We're at the beginning of mapping the human genome, and from that we're already seeing changes in cancer treatment, changes in how preemies, premature kids are treated, changes in what drugs are allocated for or used for heart disease, all happening very quickly, and it's an accelerate. A few years ago, it cost about 10,000 euros for an analysis. It's 1/10 that today, and it's going down rapidly. Soon it'll be like getting your blood pressure taken, knowing what your genetic mapping is. That'll be big. There was an exhibit at the CES, which it's not only about wearables like this, it's about wearables on your body all over. MC10 is a company that makes things that you can wear which detect whether or not you have a concussion. When you're playing football, not only American football, football as the rest of the world knows it, head injuries are a big deal. This actually could create a little light that lights up with a possibility, yellow light if it's a possible concussion, red light if it's a certain concussion. It's the second concussion which kills kids. Yet that product is not for sale, at least in the United States yet. It's sold to our military because it protects American people at battle, and they know whether they have a concussion. But we can't sell it in the United States. Why? Because if it's not perfect, in the United States, we have a big problem. I heard about European problems. You have a problem of different languages and one digital thing. We have a problem. We have too many lawyers in the United States. They will sue the company MC10 out of business if they sell one that doesn't have a red light when there's a real concussion and a kid dies. So the perfect becomes the enemy of the good. There's another product we saw that's for women. It's insertable into the cervix, and it does everything that my Fitbit does. But what it's being used for now is it tells you what temperature your body is so you are fertile. So you have a 48-hour period to conceive rather than a 4-hour period today. Women are interested in it. The Vatican is interested in it because it's also a time when it's considered a natural form of birth control. Another major disruption is robotics. Robotics is absolutely huge. Now, when you think of robotics, we think of science fiction movies, but it really started out with the TV remote control, the garage remote control, the Roomba, and it's moving to many, many other things which will take people's jobs, whether they're security guards or other people. It will have an impact, and it is the future. We're seeing much more in robotics. And of course, you're all familiar with the sharing economy. There's two types of sharing economy that I see. There's the capital sharing economy. You buy something, you own something, and you share it with others. There's the car sharing services like Uber and Lyft and the French one who's blah blah. They're incredibly in dispute around the world. They're legal in some. Today, the governor of Utah actually just vetoed legislation legalizing Uber because it was too restrictive. It required fingerprinting of Uber drivers. It required they have insurance that no other taxi cab driver would have. But Uber and Lyft, which I should disclose, most of these companies are members of our association and they partner with us. Uber and Lyft are the reality. And we just released a rating of the 50 states, and we may soon do it for countries. Are they innovation friendly or not? One of the 10 criteria was, do they allow Uber and Lyft to participate? And sadly, too few cities around the world do. Other capital sharing, obviously Airbnb. There's tool sharing websites. There's nanny sharing websites. There's all sorts of sharing websites out there. Another major form of disruption is idea sharing. And what do you have with idea sharing? You have websites with your opinions, and they're all over the world. In the US, we have the Huffington Post, we have Fox News, we have all sorts of people on different sides. They share their opinions, but also their ratings. If you think about the Yelp for reviews, and you think about others that rate hotels, the photos, the guidebooks we used to buy when we traveled, they no longer, they're relegated to a very small market share now because they've come along and they've replaced old guidebooks and old recommendations, but we're making better decisions because we're sharing information and ideas about what we know. So groups like a company like TripAdvisor, who I rely on before I even booked the hotel here. I checked out all the hotels and I went to TripAdvisor and made my decision. Another major disruptor, which if you were in the other room earlier today, you heard a lot about, was currency, Bitcoin. You know, we all talk about who's in the euro, who's out with that, but the reality is we're going to new ways of transacting without a middleman involved, whether it's a federal government or, with all respect to the sponsors here, a credit card company taking their portion. It makes transactions more seamless, and it does disrupt the status quo of people who are making money, taking their VIG, which is happening all the time across other places. Another major disruptor is virtual reality. Of course, it is coming very quickly. We're seeing all sorts of examples about that. There are glasses that you could put on, or even Google just did a little exhibit with us last week on Capitol Hill, and they showed these glasses you just put on. They're made of paper almost. You can go to a website and make them yourself, and they give you a 3D experience, which is pretty phenomenal, actually. But obviously, Oculus Rift and others are coming along with products. Who's acting a threat? I don't know. I was trying to come up with that, and I decided I wouldn't say that prostitutes would be threatened. I'm just not sure. Just want to see if anyone's paying attention here. So when you think about how you act today versus how you're going to act in 10 years, when you want to buy something today, what do? You go to a retail store and you buy it, or you go online or you call and someone will deliver it to your home. You have two choices. In the future, you'll have three other choices. Anybody want to tell me what one of those will be? No? Nobody has an idea how else you can buy something and get it to your home? Okay. Driverless cars is one, obviously. A driverless car. Thank you. Drones, number two. Drones. I've seen so many different drones lately, and they work. And what they will do, I've been judges in various innovator contests, and one of the ones that I thought was really cool, and actually won, was in third world countries to get that last kilometer to someone who needs medicine. How do you do it when there's impassable roads and mud and water? You take a drone and you send the medicine, you send a drug testing kit, and it comes back. And you could actually daisy chain the drones, so they plug in, they recharge, another one goes off, and you could cover kilometers and kilometers that way with a drone. Drones will also be used in cities as a way of delivering things, rooftop to rooftop. It'll end some of the congestion we face in cities. Drones are coming, but they do also face regulatory roadblocks. Sadly, in the United States, we can't test drones because our federal government doesn't allow us. So Amazon has a drone testing operation right outside the border in Canada, so they can test drones. But how much water crops need, what's going on, how bridges are being inspected. It'll be said drones will save a lot of lives in the future, and they are the next element. Last week in Washington, D.C., we hosted a major dinner for politicians in what's called the National Building Museum, which has a huge high building. We actually had a drone flying overhead, and it was videoing the people there, and they all waved, and they could see it on the screen. It was really very exciting. So drones will provide a lot of fun for people as well. They have business uses, but they also have their consumer hobbyist is growing very quickly. The third way, in addition to driverless cars and drones, which will be the future, is you'll make it yourself in your home with a 3D printer. 3D printers already been used by the space station. They had a tool that broke, and it would have taken several months to get it up. Instead, they just had it on a 3D printer, and that tool was created, and it changed lives. 3D printers are being used today in third world countries and in war-torn countries to provide artificial hands for fast-growing kids when they lose their limbs. And instead of something costing several $1,000s or euros, we're talking about something which costs a fraction of that. 3D printing will also be used, obviously, for replacement parts. They're already being used to create shoes and jewelry, and we're just beginning now. The limitation on the 3D printing, ironically, are not the patents. They're expired from a long time ago. The limitation is the input materials. Right now, it's hard plastics, which have a low flame rate. So we're quickly going to food. Sugar is a great product for 3D printing. We're going to see bakeries around the world changing how they do wedding cakes. We're going to see different things where you can have anything you want 3D printing. But as we get other food components, we'll get medical components. We're going organic. There'll be artificial real body, skin, and other parts will be part of 3D printing. And of course, there'll be that great home use where kids could create something, whether it's, as we saw recent, one of the presentations there with Legos or something else. That's what 3D printing will be about. And of course, finally, there's a great use of social media in terms of where we will see disruption. You know, obviously, social media, in terms of the sharing economy, is also things like Instagram and Snapchat and others where we're sharing for a specific purpose. And there's great experiments going on there all the time. I was at South by Southwest in Austin a few weeks ago, and I met an entrepreneur who had what he thought was the coolest thing. He said 30,000 people signed up to it since its launch 2 weeks earlier. And what it was is it takes a picture. No, it doesn't take a picture. Participants take a picture when they are alerted by text message. Whatever they're doing, 24 hours a day, they are on call to take a picture, which sounds terrible to me. No one's going to wake me up so I could take a picture in my dark bedroom. But apparently people are doing this all over the world. And his argument was every other photo you see is contrived and it's what people want to see. This shows real people's lives. My point is that people have ideas, and we're living in a time in history when anyone with an idea, with a broadband connection and a computer or a smartphone, they could create a business that's global overnight. We've never been in that before. It's been a great equalizer in the world, and things will be disrupted. Our natural inclination is to oppose these things. That's what we do as human beings. But we have to change and experiment and try. And we talk about which countries and regions are the most innovative. It's those that culturally are willing to change. One of the things I like, and I am an American, and I don't apologize for it, but we are very heterogeneous. We have a culture of immigrants. We are immigrant culture. So we're much more willing to risk things and try new business ideas. And that's why I think we have been fairly successful with innovation, but it requires a cultural change. It requires a legal environment. It requires a willingness to recognize the motto that I spread to everyone is that you must innovate or you will die. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.